Hey there, boys and girls and other gentle folk. Welcome to the table flip episode of Booze and Bible Stories. Tonight's episode is brought to you by Jameson and Ginger Ale, one of my favorite drinks. I'm 20 seconds into this and I just said I'm really trying to break myself of the habit of that, saying So if you're playing the drinking game at home, every time I say or catch myself saying or then you have to drink. Love Jameson and Ginger Ale. I like to get these little 7.5 ounce cans of Canada Dry. Just said again. I put I put a couple of ice cubes and then 3 or 4 ounces of Jameson in a glass, and then fill it the rest of the way with one of those 7.5 ounce cans of ginger ale, and that usually fills it up to about there, so you can see how much I've had to drink already. I already scrapped one of these videos. This is the second one at least. So the table flip episode. Anybody that's familiar with the New Testament already probably knows what the table flip episode is all about. Oh, I should stop right here and say, if this is your first video of Booze and Bible Stories, you should probably go back and watch the disclaimer episode so that you don't get offended. The disclaimer episode will give you all the warnings ahead of time. So go ahead and you can stop this video, go back and watch the disclaimer episode, and then come back to this one, the table flip episode. I'm telling this story because my daughter Sarah says it's one of her favorites. And seems appropriate because today is actually Easter. When I'm recording the video, when you watch it, it may not be Easter anymore. It likely won't be, but it's Easter today. And a lot of people wonder, shit, I just said again. I'm trying to break that habit. And you have to drink. A lot of people know about the incident that I'm going to talk about. So it's an incident where Jesus gets to the temple and he's not happy with what's going on, and he starts flipping tables. And it's something that's a fixture in pop culture because there are memes and stuff that say things like, remember when you ask yourself, what would Jesus do? It includes the possibility of flipping tables over and beating people with a whip. So a lot of people are familiar with the story, whether or not you happen to be a Christian or not. I think it's Sarah's, my oldest daughter's, favorite because it's very likely that this is an account of Jesus just losing it. And you can't blame the guy. So it's appropriate that I'm telling this story today on Easter because the setup for the story, and the reason that I think Jesus may not have been in the best mood, is he has just ridden into Jerusalem the weekend of his crucifixion. So he's about to be killed in a couple of days. If I was going to be strung up by an angry mob, given over to the Romans to be crucified, I don't think I'd really be looking forward to that. And I think I might not be in the best mood either. So Jesus rides into Jerusalem. They come up to the temple, and he sees that they're buying and selling stuff. There are money changers there that are exchanging money because people have come from all over the place to come and make some kind of sacrifice there at the temple. And especially Passover weekend, there would have been a lot more people there for the Passover. So all these people are there, and there are these money changers in the courtyard of the temple, and also there are people selling things like turtle doves to be offered as a sacrifice. So if you didn't bring stuff with you, you could buy something there to give as a sacrifice. So there are at least there are money changers and people selling sacrificial animals there. Jesus gets there and he is not happy. And the way I've always imagined it is probably the way most people do, and it's just that Jesus just loses it, right? So he knows he's about to be crucified. He's probably not in the best mood to begin with. He gets there and he just sees these shenanigans going on, this bullshit going on in the temple. And one of the passages in the New Testament says that he started to make a whip. He had some cords or something, and he started to bind them together to make a little homemade whip, presumably to beat people with. I don't know why you take the time to stop and make a whip unless it's your intention to beat the shit out of somebody with it. So Jesus has found some cord and he's tying it together and making a little do-it-yourself whip. And I imagine that probably Peter maybe looks over and notices Jesus off to the side, and Jesus is just going at this whip, infuriated with what's going on. He's just looking around the courtyard and just making this whip. And I imagine Peter leaning in and saying, hey, Jesus, are you okay? Everything all right? Jesus doesn't look up. He doesn't respond. He just keeps working on the whip. Peter turns to James and John. And he's like, hey, guys, I think something's wrong. The master does not look happy. I don't think this is going to end well. And so the text goes on to say that Jesus starts flipping tables. He starts turning over benches, and he starts driving people out. And one of the passages in one of the Gospels says that he wouldn't allow anybody to even carry anything through the temple courtyards. It says it wouldn't allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courtyards. So not only is he knocking over tables, knocking over benches, potentially beating people with a whip, but people that have already purchased merchandise and have it in their hands, he's knocking it out of their hands and being like, not in my house. So just loses it. He's driving all these people out. And he quotes a passage in the Old Testament where he says, my house is supposed to be called or known as a house of prayer, and you've turned it into a den of thieves. Or one of them says, you've turned it into a marketplace. So he is really pissed off that they're buying and selling shit there. And it says that he was driving out both those that were buying and selling. So he wasn't just mad at the people that were selling stuff there. Some people have read that text and said, oh, he was mad because the people selling stuff were ripping people off. But the text actually says that he was driving everybody out, those that were buying and selling. And the fact that he was knocking merchandise out of people's hands is a pretty good indicator that he wasn't happy that commerce was going on there. He wasn't just unhappy that somebody was being cheated, but he was pissed off that anybody was selling shit or buying shit in his father's house, in the place that was supposed to be a house of prayer. So he's not having it. But I realized this could have gone down a completely different way. I imagine that Jesus loses his shit. And I think that's the most colorful way to kind of imagine it. But the text isn't really that explicit. It could have gone down like this. Jesus could have made his whip. He could have walked over to the first table, looked at the first guy and said, get out. And I imagine if that happened, the guy would have looked at this guy, Jesus, like, who the hell is this guy? What do you mean, get out? And then he looks down and he notices that Jesus has this whip in his hand. And he looks back in this guy's eyes, and Jesus maybe looks a little bit crazy. And he leans in and says to the guy again, get out. And of course, this guy's thinking, who the hell is this guy? Where are the temple police at when you need them? And I imagine that maybe Jesus leans his hand over, puts it just under the lip of the table, and very gently tips that table over, dumps all the money out on the ground. Right? The opposite of going crazy and losing his shit. Just super calm, cool, and collected. And just looks back at the guy and says, get out. And at this point, maybe the guy's thinking, I don't make enough to deal with this. And he gets up and takes off. And I imagine Jesus looking at the next guy at the next table, who has just watched everything that's happened. And he says to him, get out. As he's walking towards him, and the guy sees the whip in his hand, and he saw what just happened to his buddy. Jesus puts his hand under this guy's table and slowly tips it over and dumps it over too. This guy gets up and takes off. Now, the third guy, who's watched this happen to the other two guys, he just gets up and starts running, and then they all start taking off. And then Jesus starts knocking stuff out of people's hands and driving them out. But he may have been cool, calm, and collected about it. Maybe he didn't lose his shit. I don't know. But either way, whether he went nuts or whether he was super cool about it, the point of the story is he didn't like people selling shit in the temple. And he didn't like people buying things there either. He didn't want it turned into a marketplace. So if you're somebody that happens to be one of his followers and you sell stuff, you may want to rethink that. Maybe you should do what other people do and give everything away for free that you do. And then just tell people, hey, if you like the things that I'm giving away, then you can support me, and give people the option to do that. There's a lot of people that do that on the internet, give stuff away for free and just tell people, hey, if you like what I do and what I'm about, then here's a way that you can, show me support. Either way, I wouldn't take any chances. If you're somebody that is a believer in Jesus, I wouldn't take any chances with with making him as angry as it appears that he was in this story. Anyway, that's the first edition of full edition of Booze and Bible Stories. If you haven't watched the disclaimer episode, go back and watch that for giggles. And that's it. We'll see you next time. Skol.